Hey everyone, David Aragona here for another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. The focus of this video is the prep taking place out in Southern California on Saturday at Santa Anita, the Grade 2 San Felipe Stakes, offering 50 Kentucky Derby qualifying points to the winner of this race. And we've got a field of 11 signed on. Let's throw this one up. Just did a video on the Fountain of Youth where there is a heavy favorite. Not the case in the San Felipe. Could be a wide open board, a very contentious race. And something that I should talk about right at the top is that there are 5 Tim Yakteen trained runners in this race, but only one of those, the number 3 Practical Move, has been in Tim Yakteen's barn for more than the past week or so, because the number 2 National Treasure, the number 7 Hejazi, the number 9 Fort Bragg, and the number 11 Mr. Fisk are all former Bob Baffert trainees that just switched into the Tim Yakteen barn out of necessity to get those Kentucky Derby qualifying points, because as has been widely reported, after February 28th, which was yesterday, these Bob Baffert trainees, if they're in his barn, are not eligible for the Kentucky Derby, not eligible to receive points, and can't get into the Kentucky Derby starting gate if they haven't made that trainer switch by the end of February. So now that we're heading into March, these horses did have to move into a different stable, and all 4 of those will be making their debuts for trainer Tim Yakteen in this San Felipe on Saturday. Hard to know where the public is going to go. As for the favorite, the number 2 National Treasure, the number 7 Hejazi, the number 8 Go Rocket Ride, even Skinner. These are all horses that could attract support, so I'll be interested to see how the board plays out in this San Felipe on Saturday. Before we get into these main contenders, let's take a look at a couple of features in TimeformUS, beginning with the pace projector. And no surprise to see that fast pace flag showing up. You could see some new graphics there for our fast pace flag in TimeformUS. A lot of speed signed on in this San Felipe, and I think the horse that a lot of people will be expecting to go forward is the number 8 Go Rocket Ride. He is the least experienced member of this field, making just the 2nd start of his career after a 6-furlong sprint win on debut, where he did go gate to wire, so you'd imagine they're not going to mess with those tactics in this San Felipe, though there are plenty of others that have tactical speed that figure to be forwardly placed, like the number 7 Hejazi in particular, another horse coming out of sprint races. National Treasure and Fort Bragg have also shown the ability to be up close to the pace, and even a horse like the number 4 Bluegrass Go-Go, who's shown further back on the pace projector, is coming out of a sprint race where he set the pace. So this could be a pretty contentious race on the front end, and that would help a horse coming from off the pace like the number 10 Skinner, who might be an appealing closing option in this race. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a bit, but before we get to the contenders, let's also take a look at the TimeformUS finish projector. This is a new feature in TimeformUS that you can access from your DRF mobile PPs just by tapping on the TimeformUS tab to access the new TimeformUS version. And this is based primarily on the pace projector and speed figures coming into this race. And the number 8 Go Rocket Ride is shown as the algorithm selection winner of this race. He is coming in with the best last out TimeformUS speed figure. So that's one of the reasons why he is shown winning this race. Other horses that are predicted to do well are some other runners coming out of the Bob Baffert stable, making that switch to Tim Yakteen, the number 2 National Treasure, and the number 7 Hejazi. And also note the position of that number 10 Skinner, a horse that might be coming in with some slightly lower speed figures, but does have the pace projector in his favor. So figures to be one that is charging at the end of the San Felipe. Well, let's go through the main contenders, and I want to talk about 7 different horses in this race, and I'll take them in post-position order, just kind of glossing over those big prices that are going to be outsiders in this race. So I'll begin one off the rail with the number 2 National Treasure, and we'll take a look at his race 2 back when he was 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and this was a pretty good performance for a horse that was pretty light on experience at this time. This was just the 3rd start of his career, and he finishes just in behind 2 of the most talented 2-year-olds that we saw anywhere last year in the juvenile champion Forte, who wins this race, and his stablemate or former stablemate Cave Rock, who was 2nd. Good effort there from National Treasure, earning a 1:16 TimeformUS speed figure, which really gave some validation to the number that he had received when finishing 2nd in the American Pharaoh in his 2nd start as a 2-year-old. The problem with National Treasure is when he made his 3-year-old debut in early January in the Sham Stakes, didn't really take any kind of step forward. He was the beaten favorite at 3-5 that day, losing to Reincarnate and Newgate. Had a little bit of early trouble and then failed to settle towards the inside, but all things considered, he had his chance to run those horses down in the stretch and just failed to do so. The one positive I would take from that sham is that both of those horses who beat him have since done some good things. The runner-up Newgate is off the Derby trail since then, but he did come back to win the Robert B. Lewis with a strong speed figure in the interim. And also Reincarnate, the winner of this race, as an upset. He came back to finish a pretty good third last week with a troubled trip in the Rebel Stakes. So National Treasure arguably flattered by form lines, but he does have to take a step forward. This is a horse that showed a lot of precocity last year, and we haven't really seen him step forward from a speed figure standpoint since that second start of his career. So looking for National Treasure to show some progression in the San Felipe on Saturday. Moving one to his outside is the number 3 Practical Move. We'll take a look at his last race when he closed out his 2-year-old season with a victory in the Los Alamitos Futurity, beating a trio of Bob Baffert trainees in this race. Actually, the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th place finishers all coming out of the Bob Baffert barn, and they all were heavily bet this day. Not the case for Practical Move, who went off at 10-1 and was able to beat them pulling away as they come to the finish line. This is the horse that has been in Tim Yachteen's barn all along. He has been trained by him since the start of his career, but now he's one of 5 entered for Tim Yachteen in the San Felipe subsequent to all of those trainer switches. I think the big question for Practical Move is, was that just some kind of Los Alamitos fluke? Sometimes we see that Los Al form not really translate to the other Southern California track, Santa Anita or even Del Mar, and Practical Move has to prove that that last race was not a fluke because he had not run quite as well in his prior starts, had been easily beaten by a couple of Bob Baffert trainees in his prior race, the Bob Hope, and before that he was beaten by Fort Bragg, obviously elevated by disqualification that day. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit, but Practical Move still has some questions to answer as he makes his 3-year-old debut here coming off the layoff, but that last performance does put him somewhere in the mix. We'll skip over a couple of runners that are going to be very big prices and move towards the outside now. The number 7 is Hejazi, and we'll take a look at this runner's last race when he broke his maiden in mid-January at Santa Anita. Now, this was a sprint race, just going 6.5 furlongs. He'll be stretching out an extra 2 furlongs here to try the 8.5 furlong mile and the 16th distance. The good thing about this performance is Hejazi did earn a pretty gaudy TimeformUS speed figure for this effort, 114. The buyer was even higher, got a 99 buyer for this race. So Hejazi is coming in as one of the fastest horses on speed figures in this race. I think the big question for this former Bob Baffert, now Tim Yachteen trainee, is that he hasn't really proven he wants to go this far. He earned a respectable 113 TimeformUS speed figure when he was 3rd in his lone prior 2-turn attempt in the American Pharoah last year, but he was losing ground at the end of that race, easily beaten by National Treasure as well as Cave Rock, the winner of that race. So Hejazi's going to have to do a little bit better going the 2 turns here if he's going to be successful in a race like the San Felipe. And furthermore, there is a lot of speed signed on, and he did win last time in gate-to-wire fashion. We'll see if he can withstand a lot of pace pressure while trying to get this longer distance second off the layoff. His outside is a horse that could be pressing him on the front end, and that is the number 8, Go Rocket Ride. We'll take a look at his last race, also coming out of a maiden race sprinting. This one was going 6 furlongs, and Go Rocket Ride is making his career debut this day. He was kind of a secret coming into this race, going off at 6-1, not strongly bet into the face of a Bob Baffert trained horse that went off at 1-2. That was Sonoran, who was second this day and actually came back to win out of this race with a respectable speed figure. And Go Rocket Ride was pretty impressive, beating that rival by nearly 6 lengths. That 116 TimeformUS speed figure, as I said, the fastest last out number of anybody in this field coming in. Do note, though, you see that red color-coded race rating box on the left of your screen in the TimeformUS PPs. That indicates it was a day at Santa Anita where speed was doing well in all of the dirt races. So maybe Go Rocket Ride a little bit carried by the track. He did hug the rail the entire way in that debut victory. His trainer, Richard Mandela, is not known as the kind of trainer that will rush horses along to make the Kentucky Derby trail. So it has to be taken as a good sign that he's giving him a shot in this Kentucky Derby prep in just his second career start. I did look up some stats for Mandela with last out debut winners making their second starts. Over the past 5 years, he's 4 for 12. That's a 33% win rate with a $4.33 ROI. So in a small sample, pretty good numbers for Mandela with horses like Go Rocket Ride, but he still does have a lot to prove, and we'll see what kind of price he goes off in the San Felipe on Saturday. Moving to his outside is the number 9, Fort Bragg. And this horse is still a little bit of an enigma coming in here after 4 starts to his career. This is his race 2 back when he broke his maiden for real this time, because he actually crossed the wire first in his start prior to this and was disqualified, justifiably so, for veering out pretty considerably at the top of the stretch. He kept a straighter course this day, though you did see him getting a little bit goofy at the top of the stretch here, losing momentum. Looked like he was going to gallop to an easy victory coming to the quarter pole, veered in and they turned into the stretch and lost momentum, allowed the runner-up Reincarnate to get into the race. But you could see at the end of that replay, he kicked on, held that horse at bay. It's a good sign that the form lines from that race were strong, as Reincarnate came back to win the Sham next time out, and then has since gone on to finish a good third in the Rebel Stakes. So Reincarnate came out of that race to really solidify himself as a legitimate Kentucky Derby contender. Fort Bragg came back at his next start and tried the Los Alamitos Futurity, where he finished far behind Practical Move. But I don't think we saw the best of Fort Bragg that day. They tried to rate him in a race that didn't feature a whole lot of early speed for the opening quarter, and Flavien Prat tried to stick him in behind horses, and you could see Fort Bragg really resented it. He was pulling, throwing his head about, just got extremely rank in the opening quarter, and I think that's where he ran his race. He didn't have any kick left at the end when they finally asked him for some run. So I don't think that was a true gauge of Fort Bragg's ability. I did like both of those 2-turn maiden races. Even though he was goofy, he was going away from Practical Move at the end of that race 2 back when he was taken down. And then that race, I should say 3 back and then 2 back when he beat Reincarnate. Again, I like the way he finished. I think this horse has more ability than his speed figures up until this point might suggest. And he feels like the one of these Bob Baffert or Tim Yakteen trainer switches that might slip through the cracks a little bit. So he's definitely on my radar as one to consider in the San Felipe. His outside is a horse coming out of a maiden race, another horse coming out of a maiden race, and that is the number 10 Skinner. We'll take a look at his last out victory just 3 weeks ago on February 12th when he won a 1-mile 2-turn maiden race at Santa Anita. Now, even though he's making the jump up from maiden to stakes company, he beat some pretty good rivals on this day, and you can see does it in commanding fashion. He's pricking his ears in mid-stretch here, winning seemingly with something left in the tank, and this is a horse that had shown ability as a 2-year-old. He was grade 1 placed in the Del Mar Futurity in just the second start of his career behind Cave Rock. Obviously, something went wrong when he tried 2 turns for the first time in the American Pharaoh. He was off for a long time after that, but you had to like what you saw from him coming off the layoff last time, beating maidens. And for a typically conservative trainer like John Sheriff's to wheel him back in just 3 weeks and try stakes company to try to make a late entry onto the Derby trail, that's got to be considered a good sign for Skinner. And we talked about that pace scenario. He is one that should get the right setup with a lot of speed signed on to aid his late run. Another horse that could benefit from some hitting up front is the number 11, Mr. Fisk, another runner that is coming out of maiden company. This is his maiden breaking score last time on January 2nd at Santa Anita, going that same 1-mile distance. And he's running down a horse on this day, Harlow Cap, who I thought in this race had a much tougher trip than Mr. Fisk did. Harlow Cap had a lot of issues going into the first turn, was ranked, whereas Mr. Fisk just got a great trip, stalking in behind horses, saving ground the entire way. And once he was peeled out at the top of the stretch, he did well to run down that foe, but I thought Harlow Cap ran the better race on the day. Harlow Cap came back to win and then was disappointing when he finished off the board in the Risen Star a couple of weeks ago. So some mixed signals for those form lines for Mr. Fisk. He did run well against Reincarnate, 2 back. Reincarnate obviously came out of that race to win the Sham and then run well in the Rebel next time, as they've already gone over. So Mr. Fisk definitely seems like the kind of horse that has potential. He's a work in progress as a son of Arrogate out of a dam who was excelling on turf during her career, going as distances as far as 1.5 miles. There definitely is pedigree for this horse to go longer distances, so the extra 16 to a mile figures to work for him. I just feel like he's one that might need more time, and this might be too much too soon to try this Kentucky Derby prep, though he does feel like one who will be picking up ground at the end of this race. So now that we've gone through all the contenders, let's throw up my picks for this San Felipe and just try to find some value in a race that does seem fairly contentious. I'm putting the number 9, Fort Bragg, on top. He's got to run a faster speed figure, but I feel like this horse has just been learning with every start. He's starting to grow out of those goofy tendencies that we saw from him as a 2-year-old, and watching his workouts coming into this race, it really feels like he's gained an added level of focus in his recent training and appears to be doing very well coming into this San Felipe Stakes. So what figures to be a decent price, he is the Bob Baffert to Tim Yakteen trainer switch that I want the most here. I made him my top pick. The other horse that I'm very interested in is the number 10 Skinner, who figures to get the right kind of pace set up in this race. He's got to come back on short rest, but I think it's a good sign that John Sheriffs is running him in this race. So those are the two that I want the most in this San Felipe, putting the number 9 Fort Bragg on top for this Derby prep on Saturday at Santa Anita. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.